Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to what I'm calling Cyberfrog Revisited. Going more in depth, more into literary analysis. Going to give a little intro as to what that means and what that is here. If you're not interested in that, you want to skip forward, I'll put chapters in to the video. I will say, though, that if you just skip ahead and get into the analysis and it starts to be a little, you thinking, well, that's getting a little too deep or whatever, come back and hear the introduction about what this is, because it's not something that people are used to doing if they haven't been trained in it. This is something that I do for a living. I'm a literature professor. I read lit. I do literary analysis. I teach it. I understand it from both the writer perspective and the reader perspective. And if you're not used to it, you should know a few things about it. First of all, it takes into account both authorial intent and reader interpretation, and the two don't negate each other. Okay, so what you start doing with the literary analysis is you look at patterns and you look at themes and you look at things that reoccur and whatnot, and you start making connections and drawing connections in keeping with the meaning and the plot of the story as well. And sometimes you'll hear, an author of a work say, "Wow, I didn't even think about putting that in. Interesting that you caught that." And that doesn't mean that it wasn't there, or it doesn't mean that you were off on in your interpretation because the author didn't think about that as they were putting it in. On extreme cases, you might even have the author, "No, I didn't mean to say that." But if the reader genuinely and authentically sees that in the work, then it's there for the reader, and that's just as valid as the authorial intent, within reason, right? I mean, I'm not going to go off the mark too far on Cyberfrog or whatever, but I can't say Cyberfrog is really about a milkman whose wife leaves him. Obviously within reason, the reader's interpretation has its own validity. So you do look for things. It can get complicated at times, but every writer has their own themes, their own sometimes obsessions, things that are important to them, values and whatnot. And whether they mean to weave them into the stories or not, they're going to be there. Sometimes it has to do with the time they write it in, things they might be going through or whatever. This is just all part of literary analysis, taking into all of this account. So I've already been on record talking about Cyberfrog. I love it. I did a review. I'm a big fan. Now, this is all I've read thus far. At the time of doing this literary analysis, all I've read is Cyberfrog Bloodhoney and the little ash can that came with it, Cyberfrog 1998. So this is all I'm talking about right now. I do have Rekt Planter. After I finish recording and uploading this revision, this analysis, I'll start working on my literary analysis of Rekt Planter, and look forward to reading more as soon as I can get my hands on it. But it ain't cheap. So Thomas Valiant is on its way to me. That's coming too. I'm going to do a literary analysis of that as well. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to be looking at Cyberfrog Bloodhoney, this package that came, Bloodhoney and then Cyberfrog 1998, as three separate arcs, because that's really what we have, chapters almost. Even the Cyberfrog Bloodhoney book, it has two different chapters in it. There's book 1 and book 2. There's the intro, the origin of Cyberfrog and Salamandroid, Jelsen's trip to Earth, and then there's the arrival of the Vespas. Cyberfrog 1998 goes into Heather Swain's diary, telling us a little bit more about her life and how it was with Cyberfrog and Sal, but also the coming of the Vespas really from her perspective. So it's interesting. It's great. And these are three distinct arcs, like I said. I really don't think any of them are to be missed. Obviously, if you just got the very base level, I don't remember if the ash can automatically came with every copy of Bloodhoney or not, or if this was a separate tier, but I can't remember. But it's worth reading. It's definitely worth reading. It's more of the story. It fleshes everything out. So I'm going to start kind of in chronological order. I think the best way to start is with Cyberfrog, the book 1, Cyberfrog Bloodhoney, the part 1 here. And in part 1, we have, as I said, Jelsen's arrival to Earth. And immediately we have this character, Jelsen, who's this benevolent power from above, a benevolent power coming to Earth from above, who believes in Earth, believes in the potential, believes in humanity, and also knows that there's danger coming. The home planet that Jelsen comes from, Perdani, if I'm pronouncing that right, Perdani, I forget how Ethan had pronounced it. Perdani cared so much about you and your planet that you'd built what you were and what you could be. Now, that kind of language right there automatically should make you think of something. We've got a benevolent power from above coming to Earth to interested in the future of humanity, the safety of humanity. We're going to get into something now that's called intertextuality. And this is a literary analysis term. It's when a story references another story. If you understand another story that the story A is referencing, you can understand story A on a whole new level. You can still just understand story A on sort of a surface level if you don't know the other story that it's referencing, story B. But if you understand story B, then story A opens up even more to you. This is commonly done throughout literature. There's just a quick example. There's a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne called Rappaccini's Daughter, in which you have this evil owner of this garden who deals with, kind of subverts nature and whatnot. And he's got this garden, and his daughter is sort of poisoned this garden. She can't leave this garden. And there's a man who falls in love with the daughter, watching her through a window, ends up getting there, ends up being poisoned too, and Rappaccini is sort of presiding over these two in his garden. And there's this other professor who is a bane, trying to be a thorn in Rappaccini's side. And he's described as this big goatee, and he's got these curly hair on the sides and whatnot. And he's trying to save the young man from going into that garden. Okay, seems like I'm going on a rant, but it's a tangent, but it's relevant, I assure you. That if you read that story, great, it's a great story. But if you know the story of the Garden of Eden, then you know the second, deeper level that Rappaccini's Daughter is really working on. It's not an allegory by any means. It's not, we're not reducing it just to that. But you've got this evil owner of this garden is sort of a shadow version of God, presiding over the Garden of Eden. His daughter, and then the man that he tries to bring in there with her. This is this dark reflections of Adam and Eve, and then the professor that's trying to be a thorn in his side with the long goatee and the curly hair on the sides is a Satan-like character, even though in Rappaccini's Daughter he's contextualized as a good guy. It's not a slight to Christianity. It's just a literary reference. It's an allusion. So that's what we're going to do here with Cyberfrog. As I've said, we've got this benevolent power from above. I've said it before. It's definitely hints and notes of Jor-El sending Superman to Earth. What does Jor-El tell Superman, tell Kal-El? He says they can be a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show them the way. So I've sent them you, my son, so that you can lead by your example and so forth. And that's very much what we have here as well. But we also have a little resonance of the Guardians of Oa. Coming down, I'm blanking, Abin Sur, coming to Earth and giving Hal Jordan his Green Lantern ring. Here, take this power from this other world. You, an Earthling, take this power that's going to course through you and use this power to save Earth. So it's not an allegory. Cyberfrog's not an allegory for either of these stories, but it's taking those resonances of both of those stories, because now we have Chel-Sen coming to Earth, and she carries these two Pradani beings inside of her cybernetic womb, and they need a form to take. So they latch onto a frog and a salamander. But are they aliens from the other world? Are they part Earth? It's sort of like they're sort of both, right? It's just kind of really blurring these boundaries, which makes them tricksters in terms of the subarchetype. We'll get to that later. And it's very fascinating. Now, there are some differences. Okay, there are obvious differences here. Chel-Sen is a mother figure. She's a maternal figure. She is female. It says that, she says that in the text boxes. She's female. That's different than Jor-El, the father sending Kal-El. It's also different than, the Guardians of Oa, the sort of the more patriarchal structure, presiding over the intergalactic police force and whatnot. So why that difference? Why that change? Well, to answer that, you have to start looking at some of the other changes. Whenever you have a question, whenever you notice something in a piece of literature that seems odd, if it means anything, it's going to have connections and resonances to other themes and other aspects of it. So what else is different about Chel-Sen and her story here as opposed to Jor-El or the Guardians of Oa? Well, she doesn't pick a human being. Now, that was her original goal. She came to try to find a Boy Scout, because Boy Scouts embodying purity and the most noble, values of humanity. And of course, Superman is called the Big Blue Boy Scout, so we see the echoes and the references coming through here. But she can't find a human being. So she picks a frog, a creature of Earth, and a salamandroid. She submerges herself into the swamp after she's given birth, and after these Trick Ron and Dadu Ron are given their powers, and then they know their relationship to her, and they're gone. She submerges herself into the swamp, this kind of primordial ooze, right? She's the mother in the very earth itself, so to speak. It's a Mother Earth type character. And again, not strictly. I'm not talking about allegories. I'm not pinning anything down to one meaning, but this is the resonance we get. It's this very maternal character. She's in the earth, in a swamp, a fertile, place, and she doesn't just give power to one hero. It's not just Trickron. It's not just Cyberfrog who's there lonely and has to try and figure it out. No, she brings two. She's twin. It's twins. She gives birth to Salamandroid as well, who's there to protect his brother. I mean, that's Salamandroid's there. He's doing hero work as well, but his sole, his kind of primary, objective is to protect his brother. Whereas Cyberfrog's there to protect Earth. Let's think about the significance of that. Already we're seeing a strong resonance of family here in this book. It's a mother. There's a different force around a maternal care than there is a paternal care. Men and women are different. Mothers and fathers have different, cares that they give. And it resonates with the idea of Mother Earth. Chelsen herself, even though she's there to save humanity, she's very concerned with Earth as well. When the Vespas come later in book 2, she talks about the vibrations, like all of the non-human entities of Earth are crying out, their vibrations are on edge or whatever, so she's very in tune with nature itself. She's almost this Mother Nature-like character in terms of her activity there. So really great, a wonderful imagery right there. We're dealing with family. So that's our first theme. Okay. We're dealing with family. And what does it mean to be human? Because Chelsen came to find a Boy Scout. She couldn't. So she gives birth to these entities, and they take on the forms of the frog and the salamander, Cyberfrog and Salamandroid. But in her relationship with them, it's a very human relationship. I mean, there's a very, very touching scene when Salamandroid is created, and she's trying to give him his mission and tell him about, the things he can do as opposed to the things Cyberfrogs can do or whatever. And he gets, tripped up. He says, are you my mother? And she says, yes. And he just says, I love you. It's this very sweet moment. And it's the dialogue box gives a ellipses. It's like sort of Chelsen doesn't know what to say at first, and she says, to do Ron, there is my heart and there is you. I know of no difference between the two. That's a really touching thing to say, and she says, go with, go, I love you too, and I'll always be with you, and so forth, and so this is heavily a maternal scene. This is not something you get between father and son necessarily, not, at least not, displayed like this in this manner. So humanity, family, motherhood even is a big theme that we're following here, just as we're going along and building on things. We do find that Cyberfrog himself is rejected at first by humanity, obviously so. I would have liked to know a little bit more about his how he is or how he reacts to the rejections. We get this wonderful little page, showing his he's hopeful, he wants to be there, but then he starts to get a little, wow, you guys are really going to treat me like this, and he has a need for Heather Swain that we'll get to here in a moment. But I would have liked to have known, and maybe this will be shown in another book. Maybe it's known more, I don't know, but what is Cyberfrog's reaction to that? Does he cross the line? Because he seems very aspirational in terms of heroic archetypes. He seemed to be an aspirational trickster so far, but unless he goes through a dark time where he's like, I don't think humanity even needs to be saved or whatever. If they're going to treat me like this, if he delves too far into that, that would take him out of aspirational territory. But I don't think he does, because when he meets Heather Swain, and she says, "I'd almost given up," and he tells her, "Never do that, never do that." As long it's just something he believes in. We never give up, So I think it's quite aspirational. His meeting with Heather Swain, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the Cyberfrog 1998, maybe in another part. But I do want to just draw attention first to the art. I mean, just the glorious art. Ethan Van Sciver, I'm not a comic art expert in terms of how to do it and how how it's drawn, but I do have my studies in art appreciation and whatnot. And what I always loved about Ethan's work, even back in the DC days, long before YouTube, before New 52 even, is that Ethan's work really pays a testament to the fact that these are mythological characters. No, it's obviously different. These are our fictions. They're our entertainment. They're not, a religion or anything like the Greek gods or whatever. But at the same time, they still have that. They do that mythological work. That's a point of my channel. It's something I talk about a lot. And I think that characters in a comic book should be drawn. They should be the type of character designs that you could put on the metapiece of the Parthenon. They should be that epic and that, grand. And Ethan's always portrayed his characters like that. It's a far cry from today, this kind of nonsense of, we need real representation in the world, and random, a modern feminist, critics or whatever talking about, no, we need this. I mean, look at modern Marvel comics, if you just want an example of how that's degraded and how that's, devolved into that. And that's not for comics. Comics are, if you understand the medium, which is a story through both word and visuals, then the visuals are there to convey the meaning too. And you can look at, a lot of, you can trace comic books back to cave paintings, ancient man's cave paintings, and the stories told by visuals alone. We put words on it later, and it's a great medium of the comic book, words and pictures, but it's necessary to both. So just sort of paying homage to the art there a little bit. But we do want to talk about Heather Swain, because Chell Sen, she's narrating this origin story for us, and she tells us, she knows Cyberfrog is growing a little embittered. It's becoming difficult for him to serve humanity, and they're not very interested in him until he meets Heather Swain. And the text is just great. It says, when he met Heather Swain, a brave young woman whose strength had been tested by the circumstances of a difficult family life. Her father died in combat, and her mother brought a violent, physically abusive man into her home. So she comes from a broken family. And again, we're seeing this family aspect here. We even the talk of family over and over, the talk of family. She has an abusive upbringing. I could feel darkness growing in her as she struggled for someone to trust, for a way to survive. And she meets Cyberfrog. And in this relationship, even in this meeting of Cyberfrog, he rescues her from this attacker, this man that's trying to assault her, and she's on his back as he's leaping through the air, and he keeps telling her, I've got you. Okay, well, Superman fans know that reference right there. Superman saves Lois Lane from the helicopter scene. Easy, miss, I've got you. You've got me, who's got you? And we also have this very Superman / Lois Lane relationship between Cyberfrog and Heather Swain, not in any kind of love interest way. Obviously there's no love interest between Cyberfrog and Heather Swain. But what I mean about the Superman Lois Lane relationship there is that they both inspire each other. Superman is here to try and help people on Earth, and he sees people that aren't really maybe trying to help each other all that much, and he's trying to inspire them to do better. And then he sees Lois Lane, this spunky little reporter, not all that physically powerful in terms of like the heroes and warriors of Earth, but she's doing everything she can to make a difference using her job and so forth, and that inspires him. And likewise, Lois is immensely inspired by Superman, because here's somebody who actually has the power to help and is helping. She's used to power corrupting. She's a little jaded at the time that she meets Superman. And we see that same kind of relationship here. And it's beautiful, when she tells him, I'd given up. And Cyberfrog says, don't ever do that, ever. As long as I breathe, I'll look out for you. Promise. And it's just this wonderful, relationship there between the two. And you see them doing that work in each other. So again, family. And you know what? They are a family. We get that Salamandroid, coming by, she giving in their names and so forth. And we have this we come from broken families to form new families. And that's a theme in the work. That's a theme in Cyberfrog, is forming new families. Whether it's from divorce, whether it's from abuse, whether it's from whatever, whether it's from different types of people, a frog and a salamander and a woman, but forming that family, that bond, because it's really the humanity of us is really what carries us through to that family. Now, that is where I'm going to leave this for part one. That's an analysis of part one. Now, the things that I'm going to find and going to show in Cyberfrog 1998 and book 2 of Bloodhoney are going to harken back to this part one. We're going to continue to develop this whole analysis. We're going to continue to do this and develop the whole picture of really what Cyberfrog Bloodhoney is a story about. But that's where we're going to leave it, just for the analysis of what is in book 1, trying to keep to what's in book 1. So that's going to close out part 1, and I will be back probably the next day. I'm going to hopefully post these in successive days, and we'll look at We'll start with 1998 and see how far we get, whether it's part 2 is 1998 and then part 3 is part 2, or we might do part 2 in both of these, but we'll see. That's what's fun about reading, when you really get into a story that is well constructed, and it's got these multiple layers to peel back and themes and connections to make, and that's reading on a whole deeper level. That's really enjoyment, I think, anyway. It's a totally different experience than just sort of passively letting a story brush over you and then going and trying to consume something else. This is real, true story appreciation, and yes, it can be done even for a comic book. There's no reason whatsoever. It's a completely ignorant thing to say that comic books can't be literature or can't have this kind of thing in it. Yeah, storytelling is storytelling, whatever medium it's in. And if it's quality storytelling, then you can find this kind of analysis in it. So thanks for watching. That's where I'll leave it there. I'll be back later with a continued analysis, and we'll move into Cyberfrog 1998. And eventually we'll get all the way through Rekt Planet and more, as long as I can get some of these great stories, because I love them dearly.